Greetings and welcome to Austin, Texas Gardening. My name is Matthew Wadrich and welcome to my channel. If you're a new viewer, today I'm going to be taking you guys on a backyard garden tour, showcasing all of the things that I'm growing in my backyard. I have a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables in a raised bed and a whole bunch of ornamentals in containers. I'm also doing zone pushing, and I have a backyard orchard where I'm growing fruit trees and a whole bunch of other really interesting things. As I mentioned, it's June, and so if you're from Austin, if you're from the Austin area, you'll know how hot it is. This is like the third take I'm filming this video, and despite the fact that it's about 10 a.m., I am already getting caked in sweat. I want to just get on with it, get out of the camera so you don't have to look at my sweaty face, and talk about some of the really cool things that we have in my backyard this month. If you're a returning viewer, you'll know that, as I've just mentioned, I have all sorts of pineapples and avocado tropical plants that I'm doing in containers. I've moved my ornamentals right now because a lot of grass is kind of invading the space. But if you're new, I live in Manor, Texas. So my channel's called Austin, Texas Gardening, but I live in one of the suburb cities of Austin called Manor. And I have a pretty nice backyard. There's about 4,000 square feet to work with here. As I mentioned, I have a whole bunch of peach trees, some fig trees, and despite the really intense heat, I've had a lot of success and a lot of fun things with these plants. I've lived here for about 7 months now, so I've had an opportunity to get started and really grow some stuff, and I think I've had a really successful spring. Obviously, spring and summer are the most, I don't want to say spring and summer are the most fruitful times of the year, because fall, I always get a really nice tomato crop in the fall. But I'm going to be talking about sunflowers, olive trees, my backyard orchard, and all sorts of things. But topically, I like to get started with my raised bed. I'm also going to do a little bit of harvesting today. I have some shears here, and I'm going to go around and cut down some tomatoes and jalapeños. I harvested a cucumber recently, and I think I might try to pickle that stuff, maybe make a video on that later. But first, I just want to go down left to right and topically talk about all the things that are in my raised bed. Right in front of me, we have some basil, tomato starters, and eggplant. So I grew these from a seed this January, and the starters that I grew from seed haven't turned out as well as everything else that I bought as a starter from like a nursery or something. These cucumbers did start as a seed, and they're climbing this little lattice here. They're doing great. I can see, I don't know about this cucumber. I don't know what's going to happen there, but this one germinated well. I'm kind of excited for that. That being said, the tomatoes here and the eggplant there, I'm hoping will pull through this intense summer heat and maybe put out something in the fall, but if they don't, that's okay. I think this summer is the usual typical Texas summer that I grew up with, where July will hit like 110 4 times in a week. And so I don't know what hope we can hold on to for our strawberries and tomatoes, but we'll see what pulls through. I obviously have some lettuce there. This is kind of interesting. This lettuce came with an Amazon Fresh order. My wife and I just had a baby, and we like to have our groceries delivered instead of going to pick them up. And I noticed the lettuce they sent me had the root ball attached, so I went ahead and just planted it. And that was like about a month ago. So it's been putting out lettuce, and we just cut a little bit off of it. Kind of see we've been pulling leaves off the bottom. But I thought that was kind of fun. Regrowing fruit scraps is something I've done in the past. And this wasn't necessarily regrowing fruit scraps, but just rooting something we got in a grocery order. And I'm pleased with the way that has turned out. If you've seen my garden tour during May, you'll know that I recently did some fertilizing with seaweed. I used a high iron-rich seaweed fertilizer to bring some acidity to my garden bed to help out these plants, and I really think it's helped this beefsteak tomato plant a lot. So this is for sure the last summer crop that's growing on it right now. I've got probably about 20 tomatoes here, and I'm just gonna come around with my clippers and cut these down because they're starting to attract pests to my garden. I found a rabbit over here the other day. And also, I just want to get some of the energy away from keeping the tomato fruit alive so that this plant can put down its roots pretty deep and maybe survive to the fall. Maybe I'll get another crop. I mentioned this in a couple of other videos, but tomatoes can only germinate when the daytime temperature is at or around 90 degrees and the nighttime temperature is at or around 75 degrees. So we've been well off of that for a good long time now. And I'm not anticipating that through the rest of the summer we're gonna go back down to that. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, I've got like rotting fruit here with bite marks in it. I just can't have that. I don't wanna I don't want to attract too many flies, and I also don't want to just have gross, like mildewy fruit. You can kind of see here, I'm not sure if this doesn't look like a rabbit's work. This looks like maybe some sort of insect got to this. But we're just gonna go around here and take down as many as possible. And I want to keep the garden tour moving so you guys don't have to watch this the whole time. But after I'm done filming, I'm gonna go through and cut down the rest of these tomatoes. And you can see, I mean, it's quite a lot. We had 7 pounds of tomatoes. I think it was in April, maybe early May. And so these beefsteak tomatoes have really put out a ton of fruit. And there's a whole lot more in there. It's kind of hard to see from here. Again, I'm gonna have to come back around after I'm done filming. But what I wanted to illustrate was just, there's a lot of tomatoes here. On this plant over here, I'm not sure what's going on. I think that it's just kind of a combination of intense sun, maybe competing root systems sucking out nutrients because it's next to the strawberries. But this plant's just drying out. I've tried to fertilize it, I've tried to heavily water it, but not a lot can be done when it's just 100 degrees over and over and over. So we have like shriveled up, unhealthy, like there's some really obvious examples in there. I don't know if that's showing up on video, but some dead tomatoes, which is okay. If these pull through to the fall, I anticipate we'll get another crop. I also have some rosemary and some bean shoots that are just hanging out. The rosemary's always doing good. I have made tons of shepherd's pie with that rosemary, and I highly recommend you try growing rosemary if you live in Austin. My mother always grew rosemary when I was a kid. It's something that just does really well in this heat. Somehow, some of these strawberries are growing. I can see there, we got a couple that look, I mean, they're tiny, but they're there. This is our larger strawberry plant, and I can see it must be from like a week or two ago. I think we had a cold front and a rainstorm come through. So the strawberries are confused and thinking now is a good time to grow, but it isn't. We're gonna have to come back for more tomatoes later, but for right now, I also have some peppers. I planted some Anaheim peppers, and these are actually Carolina Reaper peppers, which I probably shouldn't have in my backyard because I have a dog, and I don't want to encourage my dog to actually go after those peppers. I'm gonna walk around this way. And I have so many jalapeno peppers. When they turn red like this, they get a little more sweet than I care for, but that'll be a good opportunity to try pickling them. These jalapeno plants I'm trying to remember where I got these. I think I got these from Green and Growing. They were something like $25 a piece back in April. And I love growing jalapenos. I love spicy food. I've made salsa in the past with tomatoes and jalapenos, and I'm not doing that this time. These will probably be involved in sandwiches, barbecue, and pickled with our cucumber. So I love barbecue and pickled peppers. If you've ever been to a nice barbecue joint in Texas, you'll know that pickled jalapenos are commonplace, and I think it'd be fun to try my hand at making some. Once again, I don't want to spend more than 2 or 3 minutes discussing this and kind of hovering around our plant. There's many more peppers I'm going to harvest here when the video ends, but I have had a ton of success with the things in this raised bed. It has been very cool. It's very difficult to build this raised bed. If you're curious about how I built this, I made a video in November where I explained the dimensions, and I used 2x12 yellow pines to build this. It's about 2 feet tall, 20 feet long, and 3 feet wide. And so this was a real hassle to build. If you want to see how I did it, go to my channel, dig through my old videos, and you'll find it. We'll do a weight at the end to see how much, or maybe I'll just overlay it on screen here, how much tomatoes and jalapenos we got from these plants today. So with that, I have a whole bunch of cool things in containers. As I was mentioning at the beginning of the video, I love to do zone pushing. So to clarify, zone pushing is just simply growing things that are outside of your garden zone. And some of those things that I've been growing are these pineapples here, which I got from Hawaii when my wife and I went on an anniversary trip. And they've gotten so big. You probably can tell if I stand back and compare them to the fence, but some of them are nearly 3 feet high now. which I recall was about the size that some of the pineapples in Hawaii were when they put out fruit. I'm very excited to see how these wind up doing, and we'll be providing updates. Hopefully I don't have to overwinter them again. Typically I've heard that it's about 18 months to fruit, which would be this fall, but I've heard a few people say that it could be up to 3 years, so we'll have to wait and see. And on a similar note, this behind the pineapples is an avocado plant that I grew from seed. And I mean, it's 5 feet tall at this point. Really 4, because the container kind of props up a foot, but it has gotten so tall and is still growing. I'm gonna have to get it a companion, or maybe graft some new fresh wood onto it, because you're not really supposed to grow these from seed. But I thought it was really exciting how this turned out. Even with our hard winters, this pineapple's been pulling through, or this avocado, I mean, has been pulling through, which I think is really cool. And then I also got a couple of containers here. I got these whiskey barrels about a month or 2 ago, and have planted petunias and marigolds in them, and some sunflowers. The sunflowers looked like they didn't really like the transplant shock at first, but they're kind of coming out. And of course, an olive tree. I've had a lot of success with olive trees in the past. About a year and a half ago, I made a video where I explained how to pickle and brine olives, and made some martinis at home with olives that I grew. And this olive tree has some cool growth on it. I'm not sure how another bad winter storm might upset this olive tree, but I thought I'd try my hand at it. I wouldn't really call olive trees zone pushing. This is an Arbequina olive tree, and they're supposed to grow in Texas. While my old one got battered from the storm, we don't get those storms every year. I really like the way that this turned out. And I have another olive tree mirroring it past all these little ornamentals and containers, which I can talk about for a second. You know what? No, I'm gonna come back to the ornamentals and containers and talk about this. Olive tree over here is the same setup. I like symmetry in my backyard. I think that's kind of fun. And so I've got another whiskey barrel here full of marigolds and an olive tree and petunias. And so I just used, I can't remember what kind of potting soil for this. It's whatever's on the ground over here, which is, if you're curious, I just had a couple of big bags of this. It's Miracle Grow potting mix. And I'm pretty sure there's some like spangum and perlite in here. I mean, it's obvious from just taking a look at it. Those white specks are perlite. So I think that's pretty cool. And then over here in this corner, I just have a whole bunch of things. I used to have another avocado tree in this little container over here, but I went ahead and put an olive tree in its place because it was just dying out. And I thought something would be better suited to use that space than our sick and sad olive tree. Excuse the wind, by the way. I'm not sure if my microphone is doing a good job at cutting out the wind, but if there is wind in the audio, I'll do my best to edit it out. And then I have some other fun things in containers. There's some sunflowers, and this over here isn't actually in a container. This sunflower, I thought I planted it, but this clearly is a different species than the one I grew last year. I think it was just native and just had a seed buried deeper than the turf was when I scraped it out to put in that granite. So we have a sunflower joining our plants in containers. And I have a little pineapple, which I just planted recently. And these are blackberries, which were originally in my raised bed, but I was advised to take them out just so they didn't spread too much because they're thorny and I don't want to deal with a bunch of thorns in my raised bed. And finally, one of my favorite plants, one of my favorite flowering plants is purslane. These pink, yellow, and orange plants are called purslane. And it's a blooming succulent that flowers every day. Obviously attracts pollinators, but I think just looks really, really cool. And I love to see plants open and close. I've tried to make a time lapse of this, but it's just been really difficult to do because of the wind and a bunch of other factors. Maybe one day I'll get a proper time lapse out of this purslane. But I bought this basket at, it was probably just Home Depot or something. I don't recall where I got this. But I think it just adds a lot of color to my backyard. I think it's pretty cool. Speaking of color, my roommate planted pretty much every single one of these in containers, and I've moved them. Normally I like to keep them back up against the raised bed, where I think it just makes my raised bed look a lot cooler than it would look otherwise. But I've noticed that the grass here has really been unattended I haven't been able to mow it or weed eat around it for probably about 2 or 3 months, or rather have just chosen not to. And so as a result, I've wound up with stuff like this. This pot here had some sort of seed in it, and this grass grew up through the space that it was sitting in right here. And so I've had to move all of these, and I need to go through all of them to properly get grass out of them. Obviously, they're not my plants. Here's another good example of that. You need to move your potted plants around regularly. I was surprised to see this happen, but I guess I shouldn't have been. And I really need to weed eat and edge, maybe even do some hand weeding over here, because I do not want that grass invading my raised bed. That was the whole reason I made it in the first place. I mean, one of the main reasons. But my roommate has some other cool stuff here. There's geranium, petunias. I mean, that's almost all that's left. There was more stuff over here, I recall, some months back, but now it's just all petunias. But you've done a great job weathering this intense Texas heat. I mean, y'all can't see right now. I'll flip around back to my face. I've been out here, the clock says 16 minutes. I'm soaked. It might be 92 degrees, but it's one of those days, just like hardly a cloud in the sky and intense heat. And it's not even July yet. And then we have some basil that's gone to seed and a couple of other things that I don't even know what they are at this point. But a lot of these are probably gonna get trashed here in the next month or two when my roommates move out. Hopefully the petunias either get repotted or you know, it might just be time for them to go as well. But those are some of the cool things that I'm growing into containers. Obviously, growing plants in containers has a ton of benefit. You can move them around into the garage in the wintertime. You can reposition them to kind of decorate your living space. I know that not everybody has a backyard. I personally really wish I had been doing more gardening when I lived in an apartment. If you have an apartment balcony, containers are obviously the way to go. But I love my backyard. I honestly wanted more backyard space, which is, it might sound kind of greedy, but I'm really excited to be working with the space that I have, and really thankful that I have the opportunity to do so. One of the really cool things that I'm doing in my backyard is a backyard orchard. So at this point, man, how many trees do I even have? I have 8 peach trees, and I have 1, 2, 3. I guess technically the avocado is 4 fruit trees in containers, and then the 2 figs. So that's like 14 fruit trees in my backyard. I don't think that's too many. I think that's a good amount, but I'm gonna start talking about some of the fruit trees that are in ground. We've obviously had a chance to talk about the other stuff. I have these peach trees here. And I just made a video, I've kind of already referenced this, but my last YouTube video was building out a French drain. The French drain is this granite, this line of granite here along my western fence. And I'm not gonna explain everything from the French drain video, but I will say, following the project, I have some leftover materials. I have a bunch of corrugated pipe here. If anybody lives in Maine and wants some corrugated pipe, shoot me a comment and I'd be happy to give this away to you because I don't need it. But what a French drain is just a bunch of granite in a trench with a corrugated pipe running through it downhill so that the water, which normally pools around the base of my peach trees up here, is now properly draining out and onto the street. So these peach trees have not fully recovered. One of the things that I'm hoping to do today is just do a little bit of pruning. I know summer is not necessarily the best time to do pruning. The best time would be early spring, as pruning promotes growth. But I'm just gonna go ahead and prune today. I think now is better than the fall, because we don't really want our trees growing during the fall. And what we're looking for when we're pruning is branches that are not growing, not producing anything. So like, there's 3 different main types of wood with these peach trees that we're looking for. This is what I call brown wood. It's kind of like more a trunk or a branch. There's wasps everywhere. I'm gonna get stung by a wasp filming this video. There's like 5 wasps in front of me. But there's brown wood, there's red wood, which is about the thickness of a pencil. That is last year's green wood, which is new growth. And green wood, this is honestly the best example. Green wood is a fresh shoot that just grew this spring. So what we're looking for is none of those. We're looking for stuff like this. This almost was red wood, but didn't grow leaves. It looks like it might have put out some flowers. We're just gonna take that off. And And I'm of course gonna come back around and pick up all my clippings after we go through and just cut off some things that are clearly not producing, if I can get a good handle on that. These wasps are coming for blood. But one of the things I wanted to mention was that I was talking about the French drain a moment ago. The main reason I built this French drain was to get standing water out of here, because standing water is causing me a problem called peach tree leaf curl. Peach tree leaf curl is when the leaves on your tree begin turning red. So you can see some of these are red, but more particularly red with small holes in them, like this here. I don't know how well that's showing up on camera. If you have Swiss cheese leaves, that is probably due to an overwatering problem. And cutting the leaves off is not the solution. I'm just generally pruning because I don't really want growth at the base of my tree. Cutting the leaves off is not the solution. You have to get the standing water out. And so right now, it rained a ton a few days ago, but this ground is bone dry. I don't know a good illustration of it, but typically there'd be mud over here. And like, yeah, we don't have any standing water at all, which I'm super thrilled about. These peach trees are gonna take some time to recover and probably won't even be fully recovered until next spring. But right now you can see this peach tree kind of thinks it's fall. And I wouldn't be totally shocked if it dropped a good amount of its leaves with this heat and with this, this drainage issue that was just so very recently corrected. Okay, so the purpose of that cut was actually that my GoPro just overheated and shut down, which isn't an L on GoPro. Big respect on GoPro, they make amazing products, but it is just 100 degrees out here. It's just hot as hell, so I can't be upset. Anyway, I was just trying to say that, for the record, the variety of peach trees that I have here, these three, this one, and the tall one over there, are Tex Prince peach trees. That is a La Feliciana in the corner. And then on the opposite side, I have 3 Royal Zests and a Rio Grande, and I'll point those out as I come to them. I was just explaining that these trees will need some time to recover from the standing water issues that we've been facing. And I think this summer, or rather by next spring, I'll have a lot of good recovery. I've got to get my longer shears and do some pruning off the top there. I really want to train my peach tree here to fan out rather than grow upwards, because it's already like 10 feet tall. And it's a beautiful peach tree. I love it very much, but it has no business being that tall. So we're gonna do a little bit more pruning off camera here. This is the La Feliciana I mentioned. I had a La Feliciana at my old place. It's one of the first peach trees I ever grew, and you can tell there where I just pruned it. Notice how there's no green in there. I don't know if that's even turning up on camera, but it's brown. It looks like a table. It's clearly dead wood. We're just wanting to get that off of our tree, and preferably cut at a place where it's still alive so the tree knows that the dead wood is gone. But I'm just gonna come around here and just prune back anything that's not doing well. One other cool thing I had an opportunity to do when I was off camera with my GoPro in the refrigerator was I got to finish picking all the tomatoes over here. I just didn't want you guys to bother to sit through that on camera. So we had a whole bunch of duds, and we wound up with about 4.5 pounds of tomatoes and jalapenos. And I'm super pleased with the way this turned out. Just for the record, it is hot as hell out here. I've been soaked in sweat, but we still have a really cool summer harvest, and we'll see if we wind up with anything more as the next couple of months roll on. Let me not forget my clippers over here. So, in conclusion, going around through these trees, this one over here, I've been meaning to cut this one off forever. That dead branch has just been a eyesore for a long time. This one that I'm pruning here is a Royal Zest tree. I got all these trees at Costco of all places. Not all of them. A few of the Tex Princes we were just looking at came from Green and Growing in Pflugerville. This one came from Costco, which seems kind of odd. Seems like almost a little inappropriate. But Costco's got deals, y'all. I think I paid 20 bucks a piece for these trees. And honestly, they really are healthy. This one here has so much green growth on the top, and I don't necessarily want it to grow upwards, but I'm just super pleased. These 4 on this side of the yard have the most green growth by a long shot. Some of these yellow leaves are just due to the heat. The peach trees do drop a little bit of their canopy in drier summer temperatures, but that's okay. I'd prefer them to be drier than overwatered, honestly. I'd be better off that way. And I don't have to prune every one of these. This rosette tree has maybe like 1 or 2 little tiny areas. This I've been meaning to cut forever. There we go. I just wanted to go through and thin out a bit. And then in our corner here, we have our Rio Grande peach tree. And though it hasn't gotten a lot of height, it has really dense foliage, and the wasps seem to love it. I think they just like the taste of the sap or something, because there's no fruit on this, but the wasps won't leave it alone. That being said, these peach trees are doing really great. And in conclusion for our video, the last 2 trees in my backyard orchard that I haven't discussed yet are these 2 fig trees. This one here is a Caduta fig tree. It has dropped a good amount of its leaves, and I think it's just because of the summer heat. I have investigated at my old house, I had a fig tree, and it had some similar behavior, which I thought might have been the result of a mildew infection. I can't remember the name of the infection, but there's some sort of leaf fungal infection that these fig trees can get. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think it's just really, really hot. On the other side of the yard, I have a ever-bearing fig tree, and both of these trees had figs on them. I don't know if my dog ate the figs or if they just dropped the figs, but with the birth of my daughter, I haven't had a chance to check up on these every day, and one day I just noticed the figs were gone, which is no big deal. I have a whole lot of really cool stuff in my backyard, and it's always a pleasure to work with. I mean, one of the things that I was really hoping with this backyard gardening space is that my backyard would feel kind of like a park, that I'd be able to entertain and have people over and provide a space for my wife and my children to, my child, we just have one child, to gather and just have fun outside in the summer. But obviously we're gonna have to wait a while because right now it's altogether way too hot to do this stuff. Any type of like landscaping or gardening work that I try to do during the day, I felt like I almost got a heat stroke the other day working on the French drain. I hope that you've learned something from this video, that it's been educational or entertaining, and yeah, stay cool this summer. It's a hot one. So thanks again for watching Austin, Texas Gardening.